So we are back with some Titans cards, and today it's Demon Hunter, and man, this is a crazy package for Demon Hunter. This is Jotun the Eternal, a new 5-mana 4/5. Battle cry for the rest of the game: cast a copy of the first spell you draw each turn at enemies. So this guy basically gives you a way to duplicate various spells in your deck turn after turn, kind of like giving you an extra copy. And of course, if you're playing this and you're running spells for him, they're going to be spells that are beneficial based on his effect. And obviously, Demon Hunter has great spells for this sort of thing. There's going to be damage, there's going to be removal, there's going to be life gain, and perhaps I think most likely and most scary of all is there are going to be relics. You're going to have cards like this one, Relic of Phantasm, getting copied perhaps multiple times here with Jotun the Eternal. And of course, all those free casts of your various relics also improve each of your future relics as well. So each one is a bonus on a bonus on a bonus. And this actually seems like a perfect fit for what Relic Demon Hunter is looking to do. In particular, if you look at Relic Demon Hunter stats, they're happy to play super late into the game. Like HS replay tracks up to turn 14. Relic Demon Hunter still has a great win rate at turn 14 because eventually the relics just scale enough and overwhelm people. So Jotun is going to have plenty of time to get draws each turn. That could be basically, 9 extra spells right there, basically. And turn 14 is just where the graph stops. They can go certainly beyond that if needed. There's also ways to increase the consistency of hitting this early, because of course this is a card you don't want to hit too late. You need to hit it as soon as you can, like turn 5 ideally. So we have things like Soul Eater's Scythe. You can use your Soul Eater's Scythe as a way to triple the likelihood of finding your Jotun the Eternal on time, and then use your first soul choice if you get one, as soon as you get one, to find Jotun, and then he's ready to go on turn 5. And you are taking a definite downturn on turn 5 when you play your Jotun, but I think in particular things like Relic Demon Hunter have plenty of ways to recover fast enough. Quick Relic of Extinction, win the board back, and boom, you're ready to go and overwhelm. I mean, really the only reason I can see this card not getting played in Relic Demon Hunter is because they don't need it necessarily. Like, they're already so good at winning that this doesn't really add an extra dimension against any given matchup. Like, they're just going to win anyway against most matchups. So do they need the extra spell cast copies? But I think it'll be worth it, because I think it's not just relics, right? It's extra board clear, it's extra reaction, it's extra healing, all that stuff that helps you kind of turn the corner into your late game relics. And then occasionally it's just extra, gigantic Phantasm relic guys that are extra because of the Jotun the Eternal. And listen, it doesn't stop there. We're actually going to see a card draw package in this video with a bunch of other cards that actually synergize off of drawing as many cards as you can, which of course Jotun doesn't really necessarily require, since he's capped at 1 card per turn being activated. But notably, he is the first spell you draw each turn, so if you do draw a minion naturally, having some extra card draw, having a card draw package around it can help make sure you do find that spell as opposed to just minions. Clearly some deck building challenges and things to sort out there. But to me, when I look at this card, power level seems insanely high, a bunch of extra spells, a great fit for a deck that's already good, it seems like, which is Relic Demon Hunter. And that means you've got a card here that's very, very likely to be played and very, very likely to be good. So next up here, I love this card. The Mythical Terror looks really cool. Love big demons. It is a 7-mana 3/10 demon beast. It's got lifesteal, and at the end of your turn, force all enemy minions to attack this. So actually pretty cool here. Potentially nice little board clear, but also potentially a lot of life gain. This actually has a little bit of Hollow Hound vibes. Hollow Hound, of course, has been good in some bigger hunter lists, and this could be an interesting card for bigger demon lists. We still have a little bit of big demon support in standard format. This is a little bit of a different angle on those big demons. Mostly right now they're like big crazy threats, big 9/9s and 8/8s, and a big Z-Log that push a lot of pressure and damage, but don't necessarily have a lot of stabilization or recovery. And this could be a different way to take it. where you cheat this into play a little bit early, maybe take a nice swing on board in the mid game, recover some health, and then have your remaining big demons to help you close out the game. I will say that introducing this into the pool of things that you might randomly summon off of like your Fellscale Evoker, your big cheat cards like that, might reduce some control. Like you might get this when you need a big threat, or you might get a big threat when you need this, which could be a little bit clunky. But there are other things you could do too, like, you know, you've got a Raging Fell Screamer that can make this cost 5. Coming down on turn 5 in particular, this could be a huge stabilizer. There might still be a lot of like 3/3s on board that's just totally wipes out and heals you a ton. Makes you feel safe against aggro, basically. So I like this existing as a possibility. Now, Big Demon Hunter was good for a while there with Fellscale Evoker, but currently not exactly lighting up the charts for win rates. So is this enough to kind of pull that back to the forefront? I doubt this really does the job by itself. It's the only card that seems like it's going to be able to do that for Big Demon Hunters, but still a nice tool, and that's still a fine deck. It's like a tier 3 deck right now, so yeah, this looks like a reasonably good addition. Moving on to the Disciple of Argus, a new 3-mana 2/2 Death Rattle, summon 2 2/2 elementals with taunt. So many 2/2s here. And yeah, this card actually has like a lot of stats in it. It's multiple bodies, it's taunts, it's, you know, sticky and frustrating, and it does a lot really for a 3-mana card. Like this is much better than, you know, 3-mana Death Rattles we would have seen in the past. That said, I still don't think this gets played. The Demon Hunter just has so many game plans that are so advanced and so synergistic and so directed. Where does this slot in? Without some sort of additional Death Rattle synergies, is this card really going to be worth it? I mean, again, it could maybe be something for Big Demon Hunter. You know, it's kind of defensive in that regard, but Big Demon Hunter lists now are more about like the spell activations for Fellscale and more about like defensive utility. So this has little defensive utility with that taunt, but not like immediate reactivity that you might want instead. So I don't know. This is like numerically, historically, a card that looks pretty cool, but realistically, in real Hearthstone right now for Demon Hunter, I don't think it's good enough. So now let's take a look at Weight of the World. This is a big new card draw card that's going to support perhaps the card draw synergy package we're going to be taking a look at in the rest of the video. This is a 3-mana spell. It's Forge spell. At a base, it's going to draw you 2 cards. So it's an Arcane Intellect at a base. That's not good anymore these days, right? We're not excited about Arcane Intellect, particularly in Demon Hunter, who has access to so many ways to get cheap cards, whether that's generating resources or drawing cards through other options. But if you forge this, it becomes an Arcane Intellect that's stapled to a Divine Favor, because if you forge it, you draw cards until you have as many in hand as your opponent first. So as you can see the forged version there, it's going to rip the Divine Favor and it's going to draw you an additional 2 cards. And listen, at first glance, I was like, oh my God, Divine Favor was insane. It was one of the best cards ever. Like Divine Favor was actually busted, and Arcane Intellect was good in its era too. This is a Divine Favor with 2 extra cards, and I was like, that's so gross. But as I really break this down in the 6 minutes since it's been released as I'm recording this, I don't think it's actually that crazy. Number one is the way that you might want to play for Demon Hunter. There's going to be a lot of different card draw cards. You need to support a lot of draw, and it might realistically be pretty hard to empty your hand in many cases, and you're going to want your hand fairly empty for something like Weight of the World to pay off reasonably well. And it's at the end of the day, it's a 5-mana commitment. You got to spend 2 mana to forge it, so you're talking about a 5-mana play for Divine Favor-esque plays. And when you start getting into the 5 mana for card draw, Demon Hunter has a lot of really good stuff in that world already that is not conditional, because if you play this against like an aggro deck with a small hand, it's going to feel really bad. Only in those specific instances where the opponent has a huge hand and you have a small hand is this going to make sense numerically and from an efficiency standpoint, or it feels like it was really worth it from the mana aspect. And I don't see it lining up all that often with other card draw cards. I think you'd rather have things you can control more reliably, things like Glaive Tar. There's just so many ways to make card draw work, and make sure it always works and not have one that has this potential downfall or downside. Plus, if you're playing for a truly empty hand Demon Hunter, I would maintain there's empty hand Demon Hunter cards that kind of do this better, and again, more reliably. Like, don't forget, we have cards like Magnifying Glaive. After your attacks, draw until you have 3 cards. Like, yes, of course, Weight of the World can draw you more than 3 cards, but not always, and it costs 5 mana to do it. If you're really trying to go for an empty hand to maximize your sort of Divine Favor-esque nature, maybe you just run Magnifying Glaive instead. This empty hand package from Nathria is still floating around in Demon Hunter, and I feel like it might solve that problem in the same or perhaps even better way than Weight of the World does. So I don't know, man. I'm at first glance I was like, oh my god, what? And now I'm just sort of like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's another tool. I don't think this stands out that crazily actually compared to so many other good cards in Demon Hunter indeed. But you know, it could still do things to, you know, add an extra layer of that, do things like enable the Bibliomites of the world. And maybe you actually do have an empty hand deck, and this is still just worth it because you need enough pieces. So I'm not writing this card off. I'm not saying like, oh god, this is terrible. It's just, you know, I went from like, my god, this is 7 stars, insane, down to a more reasonable level where I think this is just another good Demon Hunter card, not anything busted, if that makes sense. All right, so moving on to this card draw package. Let's talk about Momentum. This is a 5 mana spell. Give your hero +4 attack this turn. And then this costs 1 less for each card that you've drawn this turn. So if you are cycling through a ton of stuff, this could pretty quickly become a 1 mana deal 4, a 0 mana deal 4, which I think that's actually about where it feels good. I mean, 2 mana deal 4 is probably not going to be bad in many instances, but I think you're really excited once you get this to 1 or 0, and you're able to stack this up in a given turn to really overwhelm somebody with crazy lethality, crazy burst damage, crazy pressure. Now, notably, I think the best way actually to draw a lot of cards in standard format right now is the Glaive Tar, the 4 mana card that you pump up with Outcast, and then you draw a bunch all at once, which is not a great synergy for Momentum, obviously, because if you've already attacked and activated this Death Rattle, then Momentum is not going to be of use to you. You've already used your attack. Alternatively, if you use like a weapon to proc the Glaive Tar, you might be kind of losing some of the damage from the Glaive Tar in order to get the momentum now, which could be worth it if you replace it with another Glaive Tar, you know, but ultimately still might be losing some total damage, although not necessarily immediate damage. So that's a little clunky for one way to draw a bunch of cards. That said, obviously there are plenty of other ways to draw cards in Demon Hunter as well. You may remember we actually saw this kind of like empty hand card draw package in Demon Hunter before. Things like Crixus, there's actually another weapon as well. And obviously Demon Hunter just has tons of card draw. We know that because we've seen it time and time again in Quest Demon Hunter, which hasn't been all that long since that rotated. And we're reminded of it in Twist format really quickly. So ultimately, a class that's going to be good at activating this. It's a ton of damage, which is scary. And we're going to see even more support for this as well. Extra kind of card draw synergy pieces. So yeah, this looks good to me. I mean, that clunkiness probably does keep this from being like crazy or super duper scary, but still, damage is damage, reduction is reduction. Demon Hunter is Demon Hunter. They like drawing cards. This is probably going to be useful for them. Moving on here to the Runic Adornment, a nice little 2 mana spell. Discover a spell that costs 3 or less, and then shuffle 2 copies into your deck that cast when drawn. Another card here, if you're cycling through your deck a lot, you're going to get some nice benefits here, getting these extra spells that cast when drawn. Also, cast when drawn, I think, has a pretty positive impact on drawing multiple cards per turn. You draw the 1 cast when drawn card, that counts, then it draws you something that also counts. So having extra cast when drawns in your deck can actually go a long way towards advancing this very own package. So pretty cool in its own right to help find these sooner, but then also a little bonus self synergy there. Spending 2 mana to discover a spell that costs 3 or less, it's okay. Usually we sort of expect that thing to be attached to a body compared to a lot of other cards, but if you're trying to run a spell specific package with few minions, you're probably happy in that case that it's not attached to a body. And ultimately, again, this is kind of nuts with like relics. If you happen to hit a good relic, getting 2 extra relics that auto cast in your deck is completely insane. It's not that likely because there's a lot of spells in the 3 mana pool. One of the relics, of course, is not. 2 of them are. So still possible. Kind of nuts there for Relic Demon Hunter, and probably still, again, very useful outside of that. So I like this card. I think probably more restricted to a card draw synergy deck or a no minion synergy deck as well. So not necessarily a card that everybody can afford to spend that 2 mana tax for this upside, but plenty of decks can. Moving on here, we've got the Eridar Deceptor, a 4 mana 3/5 demon. Whenever you draw a card, summon a 1/1 demon with Rush. So additional card draw bonuses and upsides here, but I will say this one feels a little slower to me. At 4 mana and really only getting you 1/1s, I don't know how useful that's going to be. It's kind of like, you know, a little reactive tool. It's kind of tidy up the opponent's board a little bit with a few 1/1s, but you got to spend 4 mana to get this rolling. Are you going to have enough mana to draw a bunch of cards after that? Is this the kind of card that sticks for multiple turns to set up for later when you have spare mana? Both of those seem like no when I ask those questions, and I don't think the payoff here is really enough for the Eridar Deceptor to feel good. If you're drawing a bunch of cards, I think you want to end the game. You want lethality. You want crazy pressure. This feels a little too soft and incremental in its advantages and gains, and I don't know that building a big 1/1 board is enough. There are some things to maybe consider with like Halveria with the Rush minions, but still, you're talking about a lot of mana to get all that rolling together. So to me, this does not look like the right shape or cost of payoff when you're trying to draw a bunch of cards in a given turn. The Argonite Golem is perhaps a little more interesting. This is a 3 mana 1/5, has +1 attack for each card you've drawn this turn. I do like the way this is a bit more threatening, bit more game ending, a bit more lethality on this one based on your card draw, and honestly is a 3-cost 1/5, more likely to stick than a 4-cost 5 health unit as well. So, you know, you stick this on 3, maybe you have a big pop off on turn 4 or a little bit later in the game, but you get the idea. And this pushes for 4 or 5 damage basically for a 3-drop, and it becomes a threat that's kind of scary. Now, notably though, this is sort of an aura based buff. It's not a fixed thing where it gains the stats permanently. So, you know, on your turn, you might juice this up to be big, but then on your opponent's turn, it's going to revert back to 1 because you have not drawn cards during your opponent's turn. So that means it's going to be pretty easy for them to tidy up and clear this. It doesn't have a lot of defensive utility. And, you know, I think most of the time this is going to be like a 3/5, a 4/5, a 5/5 for you in standard at least. Not super crazy values, which might just not get big enough fast enough. Like, you can already run pretty aggressively statted 3-cost minions that are pushing a ton of damage, that don't have this condition built in, that don't have this poor defensive utility built in as well, where they're just not good at taking return trades. So that might make this a little bit too situational, a little bit too clunky, really. Again, you might want to play more for spells, more from hand aggression, because that's, of course, where all your cards are going to be from hand. So you draw stuff, do something cool with those resources that you gained. I don't know if the Argonite Golem's enough set up there to really be rewarding. I do think it's better than the Eridar Deceptor, but still doesn't feel like enough. You know, again, wild format, a lot of these conversations might be different. Wild format with Quest Demon Hunter, you know, can go crazy, can draw a ton of stuff. I still don't think these feel like good in wild either, to my, you know, very casual understanding of how that deck plays in wild. But in standard, I just don't think these are quite good enough compared to the other packages Demon Hunter has access to. I don't see these dethroning the stronger Outcast, stronger Relic stuff for a really dedicated draw build specifically. So finally here we have the Crystalline Statue, a new 2 mana 5/4 elemental with Rush, and starts dormant. And then after you draw 4 cards, this awakens. So I think a couple different patterns for this one. Obviously you can play this on turn 2 and hope to activate it probably on turn 4 most of the time, I would guess. Like turn 3 is possible, but you got to draw quite a bit. Do note that this does not say like draw 4 cards all at once. It's just after you draw 4 cards. So you're going to hit one naturally, like the start of turn 3, for instance. And then if you draw 2 more, that's going to put you at 3. It's pretty hard to draw 3 cards on turn 3. It's not certainly impossible, but feels like that's a little unlikely to me. But then maybe by turn 4, you know, a couple natural draws, 1 card draw card. The Crystalline Statue comes up on 4. It's there to take a trade. And then the second pattern for this one is probably just playing it late in the game, with card draw in hand and activating it immediately, like just trying to draw 4 cards after playing the statue. You got your Glaive Tar up, you play the statue, hit with the Glaive Tar, it's going to activate right away, help you take some trades. And I mean, this is definitely good at taking trades into mid-game minions, but is that the best way you want to deal with mid-game cards? Like, don't you really prefer other avenues, more efficient avenues that aren't quite as conditional or maybe aren't as limited to deal with those sorts of things? We're using this as removal as opposed to a threat. When you have removal, you want it to work. You want it to not have too many conditions. You just need to be sure it's there when you need it. This has that condition. If this is in hand and you don't have card draw, or you top deck this too late in the game, it's gonna feel kind of dead too often. And if you're trying to use this as a threat early in the game, I think it actually takes a little bit too long to get rolling. Like if this is played on 2 and is summoned on 4, I don't know that that's the right shape or timeline for it to be threatening enough to hit the opponent in the face. It feels like it's going to end up like hitting a 3/3 when it comes up on turn 4 and then just sort of dying incidentally to a ping or whatever. So I don't know. In total, I guess I'm not really that sold on these like card draw synergy payoff cards. I don't know that together they really look like they do enough. I think Demon Hunter likes drawing cards to draw cards, and there's plenty of awesome reasons to draw cards. I don't know that you necessarily need these bonuses. You might just rather spend your mana on the cards you're drawing and the cool things you could do ahead of time anyway. So I'm intrigued. I think Jotun the Eternal is really good, but he doesn't really demand these sort of things. He's only activating once per turn, so he seems sort of independent and separate from these despite being revealed simultaneously. And I'm a little bit underwhelmed by the rest of the package while thinking that Jotun is kind of insane. Jotun the Eternal is a 5-star card. Momentum is a 3-star card. Runic Adornment is a 4-star card. Eridar Deceptor is a 2-star card. Organite Golem is a 3-star card. Crystalline Statue is a 3-star card. Mythical Terror is a 3-star card. Disciple of Argus is a 2-star card. Weight of the World is a 3-star card. And there you go, that wraps it up for Demon Hunter. Not a class I play a ton, to be honest. But I don't know, this with Relic Demon Hunter looks pretty nuts, dude. It's kind of fun in theory to see how big you can get your phantasms with a card like Jotun, copying a bunch of extra relics and scaling them up for you and just getting you extra copies of phantasms themselves. So kind of excited to give that a try. This guy just looks really cool too as a character. But curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think this is going to be good? Do you think this is going to advance the Demon Hunter game plan? Do you think the draw stuff can carve out its own little package in popular Demon Hunter decks right now, or are they good enough doing their own thing? I don't know. I think both Outcasts and Relics feel like they don't need all of those card draw bonus cards, but maybe slotting something like Jotun in is a little bit easier in those cases. So anyway, curious to your thoughts. Thanks so much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.